Hi, everybody. Welcome. Today, we're going to be diving into the Caregiver Work Permit Masterclass. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just go over a few things today and educate you on that program. So let's get started. So before I start, the one thing that I want to tell you is that this is actually an overview of the whole program. It is applicable to both employers and also caregivers. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about the history of the old program, and I'd like to talk about the history or where we're at with the new program and some of the things that you can do to make sure that you're okay there. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to go over the new program and some of the changes to the program. I'm going to be talking about some of the requirements and the documents. I'm going to be talking about the new programs, the differences between the two. I'm going to focus in on qualifying work experience because that seems to be one of the things that we see a lot about, a lot of questions coming in about. And I'm also going to speak about dependent family members because that's another area of questions that we get. We're going to talk about employer obligations and requirements. There's one other thing on there that I want to also talk about, and it's going to be at the end. I'm going to talk about some things that you need to think about and strategy. So if you've joined me for any of my other presentations that I've done, I always talk about, I'm not just going to sit here and reverberate a lot of, information that you can read on the website. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to actually reverberate some of that. But then what I'm going to do is interpret it as well and give you some ideas about best practices and things that you can do to keep yourself safe with that. The program changed in June 2019. And what had happened was a version of the caregiver program has been around for many, many years, right? Decades now. It started off as the live-in caregiver program, and then it went to the in-home caregiver program. And then we had an in-term caregiver, and now we're at the home child care provider and the home support worker pilot. Okay, and actually it's the home child care provider pilot, so there should be another P on there, but they're both pilots. Okay, and that opened in June 2019. So I want to give you a little bit of history of that, and I don't want to spend too much time, but I want you to understand because it's very important. Because if you actually get on the website, you're going to see references to the caregiver program, the live-in caregiver, the in-home. The in-term is pretty much closed, but I'll address that a little bit. And you're going to see the other program. And there are some other nuances that you need to understand about that. So starting with the live-in caregiver program, that was under one NOC code, and that was under one catch-all for everything. And that was the original program. The biggest thing in there is that there was the word live-in. Okay, and why that's actually important is because you had to live in, right? So that was one of the requirements. There was a lot of, I don't want to use the word abuse, but there was a lot of questions with respect to the live-in requirement. A lot of people lobbied for a while because they wanted the separation between the two. But there was a big change. The government had turned it into the in-home. So the biggest change with the in-home that we saw is we saw a splitting of the NOC codes, right? It was a 6474 to a 4412 and a 4411. And I'm not going to get into that, but they split the NOC codes. And why that's significant is because one was for kids and one was for elderly or medical care or people with special needs, et cetera, et cetera. So they split those. So that's one change. And then so you couldn't actually synonymously go between the two programs. Okay. The other thing is with the in-home caregiver is they allowed people to live out, and that was a big thing for the first time. So now what you understand is that we've went from that progression to another progression. And then in between our current program right now and in the middle, there was the in-term caregiver. The in-term caregiver only had a lifespan of about 10 months. And the opportunity there was that people who were in the other program, the in-home caregiver, could transition over to permanent residency with 1 year of experience. Okay. They had to show a few other things, right? Like language assessments and the educational assessments, et cetera, et cetera. But they got rid of the work requirement and they could transition over. Okay. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because that was only a transitional program. It finished up in October of last year and it's no longer around and no longer to be seen. Okay. So now we're at the home child care provider pilot and the home support worker. This opened in June 2019 and it came with a lot of fanfare and all of the other stuff, but there's a few issues that I'm going to dive into because a lot of people were really excited about the fact that there was no more LMIAs, right? Yay, no more LMIAs, right? Except for Quebec. Okay, so currently for Quebec, those LMIAs still exist, but all overseas caregivers need to go through the new program. There are no more LMIAs for a new caregiver that's entering the program for the first time, and that doesn't exist, except if they're going to Quebec. Okay, that's the only change. And I will say one more caveat is people that were here first under the the in-home caregiver, you can still use the LMIA pathway and go through that. However, you have the option of going into the new program or getting the LMIA as well. But I'm not going to focus on that for this presentation because I really want to stick to the new program. So before, what happened in the old program is you would do an LMIA and then you would do a work permit and then you would apply for permanent residency. Okay, so there was 3 distinct stages. Now what happens is there's no more LMIA over here. The work permit's here, and they've taken the permanent residency and they've moved it over to the beginning. Okay, so technically what you're doing is you're applying for a work permit and permanent residency all at the same time. Okay, you're applying for those at the same time. However, what's happening is that you're going to apply for it. They're going to do all of the stuff that you would do on your permanent residency, and then you're going to finalize it at the end over here. Okay, so you have to show that you've met the work requirements and you meet all of the different things that they need. And I'm going to get into that a little later in our time together. Okay, the big takeaway from this section is that forget about the living caregiver program. That's finished. The in-home caregiver is only open to people that are currently under the program. You don't need LMIAs unless you're going to Quebec, or if you're already here in Canada, you can use the LMIA option. And the last thing that you need to be aware of is that you're doing everything up front and then you're moving forward and finalizing here. Okay? Awesome. So let's move on to the next one. I'm going to go through very briefly, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you the web page so that you can see those for yourself. Okay, so the valid offer of employment, minimum language and education, previous work experience under the 4411 or the 4412. Okay, a valid English/French test with a CLB, which is a Canadian language benchmark of 5. An educational credential assessment that shows at least 1 year of post-secondary education or equivalent, and work experience. Now, some of the changes before is that under living caregiver, you just had to show high school. Okay, so we've upped that, and we've also upped the language requirement as well. Okay, but what I'm going to do, hold up all of the web pages here that I want to show you. Instead of me just reverbing it on the slide, like I said in the beginning, I'm going to focus on this. So what you can see here is we're talking about the NOC codes. So we've got the NOC, the 401 or 411. This is for people that are working with children. And then we've got the 4412, which is people that are working usually with elderly or people with high medical needs, was the old program terminology that they used. Okay. So, and you can see here, tell us how much work experience you have. You don't have any qualifying work experience. This is going to put you to the stream that you're going to be applying for overseas. You have some qualifying work experience, but less than 24. So this is generally somebody who's already in Canada working right now, or they're recently working full-time as a caregiver, okay? But they haven't hit the 24 months yet. Or you've finished it off and you have no other option on how to apply. So you're going to have to apply under this category anyways, but they're going to finalize the PR right away. So we'll get into the qualifying work experience. I'm going to show you what the NOCs look like here. So the most important thing that you need to understand, and you can check out some of my previous presentations on the NOCs and the different codes, but what you need to understand is that we have a system in Canada where we're always looking at every job is classified. Every job is classified under a 4-digit system. This one here is the home child care providers. And then we've got the other one here, which is home support workers, housekeepers, and related occupations. What's important though, is you'll notice on the previous page, housekeepers, you notice this right here? Housekeeper doesn't count, okay? So you can't use I should do that. Housekeeper doesn't count, right? And the other thing is foster parent experience doesn't count either, okay? So those are covered under these NOC codes here. However, even though that they're covered and they're under these, they've been specifically excluded from this program. Okay, so that gets back into, and again, we could get into a lot of detail on this. Actually, to be honest, I could probably do an hour presentation just on work experience and what to look for. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to focus on just giving you the high level information here. Okay, so let's go back to that. So we're going to talk about a valid job offer. So having a valid job offer, there's a form now. So previously, the LMIA, along with a letter offering the job, that was pretty much how it was done. Currently, what there is there's a form that has to be filled out as part of the immigration application. Okay, minimum language and education. So education, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to get an assessment that has to be done by an assessment body that's been approved by the immigration department. This is done through like WES, CES, ICES, ICAS, lots of I's and S's in there, I know. And some of them are better than others and easier. And they also assess different credentials differently, is what we found as well. So this is also something to take into account. In terms of language test equivalency, I'm going to bring this back here. This is the sorry, I have two screens if you see me looking this way. So this is the equivalency. You can do two different tests. You can do a CELPIP test or you can do an IELTS test. Now, currently the CELPIP it's the Canadian test that's been developed at University of British Columbia. This test is not available in a number of different places. They have rolled it out in India, China, Philippines, the US, in select places, and obviously all across Canada. Most people will look at doing an IELTS test, and you want to do an IELTS general test. Now, you can see here when they say a CLB5, you can see if you're doing a CLB5 on a CELPIP test, it's 5s right across. So that's pretty easy, right? But if you're doing an IELTS test on an IELTS general, that's a 4 in reading and 5, 5, and 5 in writing, listening, and speaking. Okay? So those are what you're going to have to achieve as a minimum to be able to qualify under this program. Okay? So let's move back. Now, previous work experience. As I said to you before, I could get into a lot of different detail about that. I'm just going to give you the high level and some things that you need to understand. Okay. So under the old program, there was wording that said that you needed to have paid work experience. Under this program, the word paid is absent. So arguably, you could use a lot of people over the years have come and said, oh, well, I'm a parent and I know how to take care of kids. And you know what? I agree with you 100%. However, it had paid experience in there. And then you had to show proof of this experience and be able to back it up. Now, you're still going to have to show the proof of the experience. However, there is a little bit of leeway in there. And due to this program, the newness of it and the processing time, we don't actually know how they're treating it. Because, Obviously, the program opened up in June. The processing time was upwards of a year, and we've now hit the COVID times where things have slowed down a little bit. We don't actually know how they're dealing with that per se, because there's not a proven track record on that. However, it is interesting to note that those words are absent in some of the language. Okay, so that is that. I would say, though, that you want to make sure that you actually fit into those as best as you can, either through education or work experience. Okay. The issue is that it leaves a lot of leeway now, too, for the officers to make decisions. So that can actually go directly into your favor or not. Qualified work experience. So I think what I'll do is I'll go back to the webpage. This is very important. I'm just going to walk you through this because, again, I don't see the point of putting together a bunch of different slides for you when it's all kind of right here anyways. Okay, so what happens is once you actually apply for the program and you get accepted in, they're going to give you an occupation restricted open work permit. Okay, what this means is that you can work in either the home child care provider or the home support worker category, not interchangeably. So it's going to be very occupation specific. So if you're coming here to take care of kids, you need to get 2 years of experience within 3 years, because you're going to get a 3-year open work permit, and it can be with different employers. But I would caution you to stick with your employer, and I'll tell you in a few slides why that's a good strategy. So you can work for any employer. You don't need an LMIA to be able to do that. So we've already covered that. You can change new employers. Now, previously, when you had an LMIA, it was very specific to the employer. Okay? It was very specific. And if you wanted to go back, you had to do an LMIA and you had to change and all of the other things. But right now, what they've done is they've actually allowed you to work anywhere. Okay? As long as you're working in that profession and you're working under that NOC code. You also see there that it says your dependents are eligible to apply for an open work permit and a study permit. This is another change that was heralded as like, yay, I can bring my family at the same time. However, I'm going to talk about that in my strategy portion of this presentation in a little bit, because I want you to understand there's also some other considerations that you need to take into account. Okay, so let's move down a little bit. Now, this is where you need to pay attention, okay? Work experience, you need to support the permanent residence application. So to support that, you need 24 months of experience, and it has to happen within 36 months. So you need 2 years within 3. Now, for those of you who don't know, previously it was within a 4-year period, and you could continue to renew and keep going on. However, they've shortened the time to 3 years, right? And you have to do 2 years within 3 as opposed to 2 years within 4. Okay, that's very important because, again, if you're moving around to different employers and different things like that, I would suggest that you need to be very careful with that, because your timing and all of your other stuff, there may be some ways to move around that, but I would suggest that you don't want to do that, okay? Because again, they're very specific in terms of the 36 months, okay? And they want to see that people are going through the program. And this was the criticism, is that they don't want people just hanging around that can't actually transition into permanent residency. Okay, so that was part of the reason. So send us proof of your work experience. Now, this is when you're at the end of it and you have to qualify to get your permanent residency verified. So they want to see that you've actually had a job that matches the job that you came under, and that you're doing the main duties, and that you have to see the 24 months within 36, and you want to see full-time work of at least 30 hours. Okay, this is important. And, again, there may be some provisions. We've seen the immigration department make some provisions on different things related to the COVID situation that we're all experiencing right now. However, I'm not sure that this would be touched. That's just my thoughts on it. But just looking at the types of changes and provisions they're making now, I wouldn't bank on that. Okay. The other thing that's is notable is you weren't a full-time student while you're working. Okay. So you can't be a full-time student. So for instance, if you're coming and you're doing a study permit and you're doing this while you're getting your experience, might not work out so well. However, if you're on a post-grad work permit, that might look at some different options for you, or might open up some different options. Okay, I'm not going to get into the requirements and all of that stuff because this gets on later with job offers and contracts. And that's it. And you got to make sure that you're still admissible. So, just don't murder anybody or anything and you should be okay. But they want to make sure that you haven't committed any crimes or your family or things like that. And you're going to have to show that. They're going to want the medical exam and the police certificates as well again, just to make sure, because once you become a permanent resident, if you've done some bad things or you're medically inadmissible, it's very difficult for them to kind of sort that out. Okay. So dependent family members. So who's a dependent family member? So under this application, you can bring a spouse or your children. You can bring children. Obviously, they have to be minors, or if they are not minors, they have to be dependent on you. Accompanying versus non-accompanying. So accompanying means that you're bringing them to Canada. Non-accompanying means that they're declared in the application. Guys. I've seen a lot of people not declare things. I've seen people over the years dealing with these shady, unregulated overseas agents that say, oh, you can't get the birth certificate or you can't get this stuff. Don't declare your kids. Okay. It's a big problem. Okay. You need to declare everybody, especially under this application. It will create problems with misrepresentation. It will create problems with, your permanent residency. There's a lot of different things that could impact you. Okay. Document requirements for family members. Again, I'm not going to get into all of that different things because we would be here for another 8 hours, but I am going to tell you that they're going to have to fill out some government forms. They're going to have to supply some documents such as ID, birth certificate, show the relationship, or things that you need to kind of put in there. Police checks. Okay. So we need to see that, they're fine. Everybody's going to have to do a medical, et cetera, et cetera. Financial requirements. One of the big changes to this program is that you do need settlement funds, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. But because it's moved out of the program, they want to see that you actually have the ability to establish. But I'm going to get to that in a few slides, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. Open work permit. So if you're bringing a spouse, your spouse can come and your spouse can work in any job that they want. Okay. And the kids, you can bring your kids and they can get study permits and they can go to school here in Canada. However, I would suggest that you want to do that with minor kids, because if you have older kids and they're going to secondary school, you're going to be paying a lot of money in tuition. But if they're going to high school or elementary school, that will be provided for free as part of, what we do here in Canada. Okay. Awesome. Employer obligations. So employers need to provide a valid job offer. It has to be made with one employer. Okay. So make sure that there's that. There's a form to fill out for all of that. You can live in or live out. Now, deductions may be allowed, and they weren't under the temporary foreign worker program previously. So what's happened is now this program has been taken. It used to be 2 government departments. There was employment, ESTC, I'm not going to basically Service Canada, right, where they did the LMIA. And then there's IRCC, which is the Immigration Department. So you have Service Canada that did the LMIA, and then and they administer the temporary foreign worker program. Now everything is under here because there's no more LMIA. So under the temporary foreign worker program, under the live-in caregiver, the employer could deduct for room and board. Under the in-home, they couldn't. Under this program, technically they can, because it really depends on what goes on with the provincial employment standards. Okay, what we're seeing is most employers are not, because again, there's a competitive nature in terms of what needs to be done here with caregivers. So I guess the government's kind of thinking behind that as they're letting the market kind of sort itself out. and they're kind of stamping out the abuse with the ability for people to go. Okay. I am not saying that, and just to be very clear, I think sometimes employers get painted with this broad brush of like, seen as not taking care of their caregivers and this and that. I don't think that's fair, because I've worked with countless employers and countless caregivers, and I've seen some exceptional employers over the years. So, but the government sometimes treats the employers as if they're, not being very good to their caregivers, which is not fair, because again, I've never worked with anybody that I felt, was not a good employer. Okay. So I think we've covered all of that. So let's move on. Now, this is important. One of the things that I do is I like to, in every presentation that I do, I like to give a bit of an interpretation, and I like to give some success strategies that I see for people to remain successful or to get through and meet their goals. Okay, so first things first, the first thing that you can do is make sure that you actually qualify under the program. Okay, if you don't qualify under the program, the processing times are 1 year, okay, upwards of a year. So you need to make sure that before you even file the application, you need to make sure that you actually have the ability to be able to meet what's required. Okay. One of the things that we did very early on, so the web address there is cgassessment.com. But let me show you the web page here, and you guys can go and check it out at some other time. But basically what we did is very early on, we wanted to make sure that people were qualified. As I said, I work with a number of different agencies, and when working with them, they wanted to make sure when they were sending people over for screening that they could actually get through the program. Okay, so what we did is we opened up this where we have why this assessment is important to you. So we actually do a full assessment prior to you actually even applying, and we know based on all of that, where people are going to sit and what the likelihood of getting through the program is. Okay. Very, very, very important. Okay. So there's that. You can go take a look at that. We walk you through getting all of your assessments done, getting all of your English tests done, all of that. There's a little bit about us and all of that. So just go to that webpage, check it out. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us there. And also everything's there for you to kind of take a look at. Okay. So I would suggest that you do an assessment right off the bat, because honestly, if you're not qualified, what's the point, right? Release upon arrival schemes. Okay. This term has taken on a life of its own. Okay. I strongly, strongly, strongly suggest that you stay clear of this. And the reason is what this means is that people previously were paying for jobs or doing different things under the old programs. And they were coming here and they were arriving, and then they had 2 years, they were paying money. And then what was happening is they were going out and finding a new employer, right? They were doing all that. It sets you up for problems. And I don't know why people were paying all this money for it, because quite frankly, you're paying to put yourself in a bad spot and break the law, right? So now more than ever, you have less time. So if you're not able to get that gap and you're not able to move very quickly and find another employer, you got a bit of a problem, because you've got 3 years instead of 4. Before you had a bit of a buffer. LMIAs were taking a little bit longer. But again, that's one of the other issues. The other thing is that you're going to have to show that I don't want to get too detailed on it, but under the program, and we don't know, but under Section 39 of the Act, you have to show that you can become economically established. I'm not sure how they're going to treat that per se, but if you're jumping from job to job to job to job, I don't know how the officer is going to feel about that. We don't know. There's enough people out there that are looking for caregivers. There's also, I think, because of currently what's going on, there's going to be more of a push towards caregivers, especially for the elderly, because what we're seeing now in Canada is we're seeing a lot of these long-term care facilities. There's a lot of issues with that. That's in the news. You can go take a look at that. As of May 29th, which is today, you can, You can see a lot of different things that are going on. So I strongly suggest that, just get an employer, stick with the employer, do your time, finish everything off, and you should be okay. Consider seriously about bringing family members. Now, I understand that some people, they've been separated from their family members for many years, and, this is awesome. We can bring the family. But I also want you to know that I've seen people over the years that sometimes struggle because the family members are having a hard time adjusting. So bringing a child, say from the Philippines, and putting them in school in Canada, it's going to be a bit of an adjustment. And I've seen that with my PR clients, and I've seen it where they've had a lot of struggle because the kids are like, nah, I want to go home and I don't like it. So I always suggest to people, like, yes, and trust me, I'm a parent too. I get it, right? You want to have your kids there, but you're going to be dealing with a new job in a new country and new. And then you're going to take on the struggles of having the family and everybody getting there and housing and schooling and all of this other stuff. We haven't even talked about winter yet, but there's a lot. You're putting a lot on yourself. So again, I'm never going to tell anybody not to be with their family because I think it's awesome. And one of the things that, over the years that I don't like is people being separated from their kids. And I know a lot of people make sacrifices for that, but I really think that you need to have a really hard look at that. And really, if you're going to press ahead with that, you need to plan effectively. Okay. Settlement funds. Now, under this program, you're going to need to show settlement funds. Settlement funds are a calculation, and we've already had one question about settlement funds for a family of 3 here. I'll put that up there. Genia Miranda. So it looks like Jeannie has done some research because she knows that for a family of 3, the way it works is that settlement funds actually work based on the number of people in the family. Okay. So what they want to see is that there's enough money for people to become economically established. Okay. I'm not going to delve into the details, Jeannie, because one of the things that I try to do is I try to stay, very broad based on that. However, I can tell you that if you type in settlement funds IRCC, you'll get your answer pretty quickly. Okay. There's a chart there that shows all of what you need for that. Okay. So you'll see the settlement funds. You know what? Actually, I'll do some work for you there. I'm going to pull up the express entry one because it comes up for proof of funds real quick. But these are based on the LICO, which is the low income cutoff. So it's something that actually happens with, let me just put that in there for you. Okay. So there's your question. Okay. So now, before everyone loses it and says, oh my gosh, that's so much money, because it is a lot of money. Now, if you look at my slide, okay, have a plan in place, okay? You don't need to show this right off the bat, but you are going to need to show this money, the show money as they put it, but you're going to need to be able to show that money. Now, over the course of time, I think this is actually a good thing because it allows you to build up funds and save it. And if you look at over time, you can actually build that up pretty quickly, okay? So I want you to think about those 4 things right there, okay? Because I think that those are really, really important in terms of, being successful and actually getting through the program, okay? So lastly, I always end my presentations off with the exact same slide. And the reason that I do that is because I'm a big fan of people actually having a plan and planning strategically to make sure that they can get through everything. A lot of people, I find, they feel that it's too difficult or they can't get through. And sometimes maybe they're afraid of being able to get through. But again, getting through life is no different, and immigration is no different than getting through life. You need to have a plan, and you need to know what your goal is at the end, and then you just need to work it backwards, okay? What I find is that a lot of people that will come to see me, maybe they make it to Canada, but they have zero plan of how they're going to transition into permanent residency or what they need to do. And this is where the big gap is when you're dealing with somebody overseas who's actually probably never been here and is sending you here, they don't know. And they don't know how you're going to transition. And sadly, I get a lot of people coming into my office that are trying to figure that out. And for me, I like to have, here's the plan out here, and then just back it up and say, okay, that's how we're going to get it. That is your roadmap. Okay. So I strongly suggest that you start by planning ahead at the first thing and then moving from there. Again, I'll just flash up our contact info there for you. So there's the contact info. By all means, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you need some stuff sorted out with, getting a second opinion on how you qualify into the program, by all means, feel free to contact us. All right. So I hope everybody's doing well. Hope you're having a great day. Other than that, all aside, and everybody's staying safe with what's going on, the COVID stuff, that's about it. So have a good one, guys. Really appreciate it. And thanks for joining. And if you haven't already, like our Facebook page. And again, maybe some of you already have. But we do these weekly seminars so that we're able to give information on different programs. This week was caregivers. We've done express entry. We've done the student pathways. And we've got a number of different ones that we're going to do over every week for the next coming weeks. Okay, awesome. So thanks again, and look forward to speaking with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything Canadian immigration.